Good afternoon to all our viewers. My name is Samantha Castle, and I'm the Senior Manager for Alumni Relations at the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to launch our very first Global Alumni virtual chat with you today. As you know, it's business unusual due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The university is therefore unable to hold physical events or gatherings. That's why we have created the series of Lead UP alumni events online to make sure that we stay in touch, engaged, and connected with each other. In today's session, we connect with Tux alumni across the world to check how they are coping with global lockdowns, whether they are learning, thriving, or just surviving. Kindly note, we will extend the session by 30 minutes to make sure we take as many of your questions as possible. So please stick around if you can. We're excited to have our panelists from New York, Melbourne, Chengdu, and London joining us today. This discussion will be moderated by Ms. Nthabeleng Matela, an award-winning radio MetroFM presenter, as well as a very proud Tux alumna. But before I hand over to Nthabeleng, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Tawana Kupe, to say a few words of welcome to you, our alumni. Over to you, Prof. Kupe.
A very good evening to all our alumni across the globe. Just as the University of Pretoria is a great university, you are great alumni, and you are testimony to what our institution can produce as human capital and as citizens of the world. Because of COVID-19, I'm not able to make the trips that I did last year, where I met some of you in your own locations. When the time comes, we'll resume. Just to say to you, the university is improving and leading all the time. I'll just give you two or three indicators so far. Again, the Financial Times of the UK ranked our business school number 38 in the world for executive education, in the top 50 and in the top 100. We also joined the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings. Those rankings measure the impact of our teaching, training, research, and knowledge production on real lives and real situations in society. We were ranked in the top 101 to 200 in the world, and in 3 sustainable development goals, we were ranked in the top 100 in the world, one of only 2 South African universities, and in 1 SDG, the only South African and African university to be ranked in the top 200. Our law school continues to be in the top 100. Our students just got ranked in the world number 40 in the Jesuit moot law competition. I could continue, but I'd like to say that even in these difficult times, we continue to maintain quality, we continue to maintain excellence. So we have now resumed our teaching and learning and even our research activities online, that is, and where we do research under safety regulations. I can inform you now that we have a superior learning management system, Blackboard Collaborate, branded as Click Up, Click UP, and that on the first day when we started, 26,000 students attended 444 live synchronous sessions, and that we have provided laptops to students who don't have over 2,000 now, and we're tracing, contacting, and supporting the students wherever they are. So I can say, under these conditions, we are surviving but working to thrive. I can say in some respects, we actually thriving. So what's occupying my mind now as Vice Chancellor and Principal together with the rest of the team. Now I'm attending a lot of webinars, including yesterday, I attended one with colleagues at Michigan State University. I'm now thinking about the future of higher education, given we can get such paralyzing pandemics. UP is a leader in what is called hybrid teaching and learning, which is contact learning complemented, combined, and integrated with online learning. That's why we've been able to successfully transition in this emergence. And so you will hear from us in the future that will become one of the thought leaders in the future of education, higher education, and indeed the future of work. Next week at the executive, we will pass a research unit on the future of work, given not only pandemics, but also given the disruptive effects of new technologies and the opportunities that they present for us to rethink, reimagine, and produce a more relevant, contextually and globally education system that makes UP continue to live. Let me end by thanking the Alumni Office and Samantha Casley's team for initiating these events, because we want to demonstrate that UP will always be in touch no matter the circumstances. And thank you to all of you who are joining in today and those who might join in later. Thank you very much. UP shall thrive, you will thrive. Let's take this further.
Thank you so much, Prof. Coupe. And indeed, we can be extremely proud of our great university, the University of Pretoria. Thank you to all of you who are joining in and listening to this conversation. We look forward to engage with you further. Once again, thank you so much. Let me hand over to Nthabeleng, who will be the moderator for this session. But before I go, please don't forget to make sure that you post and repost this particular video and share the hashtag LeadUPAlumni along with the University of Pretoria. Over to you, Nthabeleng.
Sam, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Very good evening, good day, and good morning to everyone that is joining us, depending on which part of the world you are in, of course. I am Nthabeleng Matela. I am your host for today. As mentioned by Sam, I'm a MetroFM radio presenter, DJ as well. But of course, it didn't start there. I'm also an alumni of the University of Pretoria, where I completed a BCom in economics. So let's get started on the agenda for today. Welcome so much to the Lead UP Global Alumni Virtual Chats. Since the implementation of global lockdowns, we have had to adapt to a new normal, rather a new way of living and a new way of doing things. So our key discussion today is, of course, centered around global lockdowns. That is also our event tagline: global lockdowns, learning, thriving, or just surviving. That will be our discussion for today. It will be centered around that. And we also have the pleasure of learning from each of our panelists who are situated in different parts of the world. So even though we are adapting to a new normal, it's also great that we can touch base with the rest of our alumni in different parts of the world. So we will, of course, be getting different intel from each of them in terms of how they're experiencing lockdown in their respective parts of their city. And also the discussion will delve a little bit into some of the social, economic, and political norms that are happening, be it in London, Melbourne, Australia, New York, and Chengdu in China, where each of our panelists are currently residing. So we hope that by the end of this discussion, you will have an idea on how your peers have had to engage through the challenges of lockdown right now. We also hope that you will be able to utilize some of the learnings from the time you've had at the University of Pretoria to grow and succeed in your respective careers. And then lastly, you will also get an appreciation and an understanding of the global nuances in how different cities around the world are adapting to the different lockdown regulations. So today is definitely going to be a very, very exciting conversation. You can feel free to keep engaged with us on slido.com. I will give you the details for that in just a bit. But of course, this event is brought to you by the University of Pretoria, and our panelists will all be joining us as alumni of UP, and I'm proud to say that I am an alumni as well. Some interesting things to know about UP, if you're not aware, or you may have forgotten, is that UP is one of the largest contact and residential universities of South Africa, with its administrative offices located on Hatfield campus. This 112-year-old institution is one of the largest producers of research in our country, which is absolutely amazing. UP is also one of the top 5 universities in South Africa, according to the Center of World University Rankings, which was conducted 2019/2012. It is also ranked in the top 100 universities in 3 fields of studies, namely veterinary sciences, theology, as well as law. And it is also among the top 1% in 8 fields, which is namely agricultural sciences, clinical medicine, engineering, oncology, ecology, microbiology, plant and animal sciences, as well as social sciences. UP is building considerable capacities and strength for the 4th Industrial Revolution by preparing students for the world beyond university, and also, of course, making them sure that they are work ready when they do step into their respective training fields. So we can all agree that UP is definitely an amazing institution to be a part of. Now, for us to have this amazing discussion, I'd like to mention that our guests are, of course, alumni, and they're residing in different parts of the world. I will be introducing them each one by one. You are likely aware that each of the countries have had to face different lockdown regulations. So we will be touching base with them in terms of how are they adapting to some of the lockdown regulations that they are facing in their respective cities. Although they may be different to South Africa, some of them may be quite similar as well. So we'll definitely get to hear that. Our guests will also get to share their thoughts and their feelings around how COVID-19 has impacted them during this time and what we can expect in terms of some of the political laws that have also been enforced in terms of their respective cities. So over to our very, very first guest, I would like to welcome Xolisile Sithole.
Hello,
Nthabeleng. Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, and how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So to those who are watching, of course, from their respective homes, I'd like to mention that Xolisile Sithole is a teacher and a mental health strategist in Kula. She grew up in Pietermaritzburg, right here in SA, where she then matriculated and moved over to Canada for an exchange program and then came back to South Africa. That's correct, right, Xolisile?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
And then you graduated in UP in 2014 with a BA and then moved over to China in 2018, right?
Why are you exposing me with the numbers? You didn't have to say the years. Yes, I went and I did. Like,
it's a safe space. We are all alumni here.
But yes, I graduated grade
yes.
20 and I moved 2018. Yes.
Lovely. So the interesting that happened with you is that in your first, after completing your first contract year in China, when you were actually starting off your new project, 3 months into it, you were actually impacted by COVID-19 and you were isolated for about 70 days.
Yeah. So I just had been in one city and then I moved to another city by choice. So I basically moved to like a Centurion type of vibe place. Having lived in Centurion for a little while, I loved the vibe that the city had. 3 months in, as I was getting ready to be like, okay, let's live this, they were like, no going anywhere. So it was a bit of a shock because we were just about to start the holidays. So as you know, Chinese New Year is obviously sort of in February as opposed to January. As we were getting getting ready, everything was just shut down. So that was a bit just weird. It was just also just weird. Like, wait, I was ready to go. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That's very, very interesting. We'll definitely unpack some of the projects that you then later started running in terms of mental health. So we'll definitely touch on that. So welcome, Xolisile.
Thank you. Thank you.
So next up, we have Kim Hilda. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Kim?
Good, thank you.
Very good, thank you. So to everyone tuned in, Kim Hilda is a senior talent consultant with Robert Waters in Australia. You are an international talent management specialist. That's right, hey?
Yes, correct.
Cool. And you hold a BCom in human resource management from the University of Pretoria, where you also did an honors in industrial psychology from UNISA.
Yeah. Amazing.
Lovely. So for those who are interested, Kim is currently recruiting into risk and compliance teams within banks across Australia, previously focusing on human resource management and recruitment across South Africa, Europe, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mauritius. Thank you so much for joining us, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely. So that was the ladies. Now over to our gentlemen. I'd like to welcome Werner Barnard, who is currently in New York. Hello, Werner. How are you?
Good afternoon, very well. Thanks, Nthabeleng. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the Big Apple. We are so excited to have you with us. For those who don't know, Werner Barnard is the Vice President of Customer Experience at TAB. That's the ADO Group, and this is since 2017. But before that, he was Vice President of Global Solution Design, as being what you actually said, that you always want to ensure that customers experience a very good journey and the best customer experience, right? You did say that.
That's 100%.
Yes.
Really making sure that all the clients and customers of the Adecco Group and Pontoon Solutions specifically gets the best possible experience. And that's from
Lovely.
implementation right through to the actual management of the account.
Lovely. Absolutely love that. You're also a very, very well-educated man. Werner holds an MBA and as well as an LLB from University of South Africa. He also has a BCom Law from the University of Pretoria. So you are a very well-learned man. You're actually an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa, as well as an accredited professional manager. Wow, Werner, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And then last and certainly not least, Dr. Dirk de Klerk. Welcome.
Hi. Nice to
How are
see
you?
I'm very well indeed.
I'm very well, thank you. So happy to have you with us. You are currently a teacher right now in London, that's correct?
Yes, I've just retired, so I'm not quite a teacher anymore.
Okay. But you were born in Pretoria and you grew up somewhere near Witbank, you said?
Yeah.
Lovely. So you're also quite well educated in terms of the space of music and composition. You can unpack that for us.
I have a doctorate at the University of Pretoria for music.
Lovely.
And then I have a teacher's degree that I got in London. And I studied, many years of studying. I was a career student for a while.
Lovely. And some interesting work that you're doing right now in London. You have your own meditation and study center.
Yes, I have quite a internationally well-known meditation group, I would say, called Bodhicharya London, and they're part of Bodhicharya International. So, and that is I suppose my deepest love is just meditation and teaching meditation. I did a 4-year meditation retreat in isolation in Scotland. So I'm quite happy with being just on my own. So the COVID pandemic is not really impacting me very seriously.
Okay. Thank you. We'll definitely touch base on that further in just a bit. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, that is, of course, our very amazing panel. We also have a special guest who had addressed us just before the panel came on, Vice Chancellor Prof. Twana Kupe. Also a very welcome to you. We're so happy to have you. But most importantly, thank you to everybody that's tuned in and logged in right now for us to have this very amazing discussion, which is, of course, global lockdowns. Are we learning? Are we thriving? Or are we just surviving? So I just also want to make a quick note of something. Throughout the discussion, you're welcome to post your questions on slido.com using the hashtag LeadUP28May. That is the password that you need for that. You can post all your questions there, and we'll also be running a live poll where you can post your vote on that as well. And then all polls will also be run on Slido, just so that you're aware of that. So before we actually get started in our panel discussion, I think it's important that we just start our first poll really quickly. And like I said, you can submit all your answers on Slido as well, which is hashtag LeadUP28May. So the first question for the poll is, would you like to hear more stories from UP alumni around the world? Answer being yes, I'd like to hear more, or no, thank you. If you can just submit your answers now, that'll be absolutely great before we proceed. Okay. Just waiting for the results to come through. Okay, so we seem to have our results. 86 said yes, they would like to learn more from UP around the world. And of course, the remaining percentage, 14, saying no. So that's a really, really good percentage. And we will be having another poll that's coming up just a bit. But right now, I think it's important for us to get straight into our panel discussion. So the first question that I'd like to pose to all four of you, you will take your time to answer each. How long have you been living in the city that you're currently in? And how would you describe the lockdown regulations where you are compared to those of SA? Kolisile, let's maybe start with you.
My regulations at the moment are very lax in the sense that if you're in a public space, you are allowed to walk without your mask. However, if you go into an elevator, if you go into any confined spaces, unless it's a restaurant where you actually have to eat, you have to be wearing a mask. So that's what we're dealing with. And then we have an app. So every single person in the country, all of us have this app where we have to basically put in our health, and they check your health, and every day it's updated every day, and it checks your health, and that's what they check, and the temperature. That's what we're doing. And I've been in the new city for 6 months, and I've been in China altogether since 2018.
Sure. That's interesting. I'm loving the app idea there.
Yeah.
Kim, over to you.
I've been living in Melbourne now for around a year, but I've actually had quite an interesting experience during COVID-19. So I came home for a quick week to attend my best friend's wedding in Stellenbosch in March. And subsequently on the same day as the wedding, Australia closed their borders. So I've actually been unable to get back home yet. So it's been an extremely challenging time, as you can imagine. I'm still working, thank goodness, for my Australian role, but adapting to their working hours. So in general, I wake up at around 2 a.m. and then I work until about midday. So very large lack of sleep on my side, and a definite massive change in lifestyle for me. But yeah, so from an Australian perspective though, because obviously I'm dealing with people in Australia on a daily basis, their lockdown has been extremely different to South Africa's in a lot of ways. So they did not really have as much of an impact on exercising, so they were allowed to carry on going for jogs at any time of the day. Cafes all managed to stay open pretty much, so there really hasn't been a massive impact on that restaurant industry, besides obviously in the city where people aren't coming into work as much. Public transport obviously was avoided quite a bit in the initial stages, but in general, in the next couple of weeks, probably 20 to 30% of people will be back in the offices already. So definitely normalizing quite quickly on that side, which is really great for them.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Kim. And Werner, over to you. How long have you been in the city that you're currently in, and how would you describe the lockdown regulations compared to those of South Africa?
Thanks, Nthabeleng. So I've been in New York City, or the greater suburbs of New York City, for 7 years now. Admittedly, when COVID started, I think the US was quick to respond with, let's call it, diligent lockdown procedures. Admittedly, about 80 or 90 days later, interestingly enough, in the US, the states, there's 50 states within the United States, they all open up and regulate themselves. So basically the area where I am, or the tri-state area, which is New York, New Jersey and Connecticut, I think most of you would be aware we were hit quite badly with the virus in terms of our numbers. But admittedly, as we're standing now, we are slowly but surely opening up. The restrictions are becoming less and less. And I think probably one of the biggest or nicest changes for us here in the area have been the reopening of the county and national parks, which allows everybody to enjoy the outdoors. As you know, it's currently summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and really allows for families to spend good quality time together. So admittedly, restaurants are not open as yet. We are constantly reminded of maintaining social distance. And I think perhaps a little bit different to some of the other contestants on this talk, we are still asked to wear our masks whenever we enter into public space. But I think overall, as I said, that position is very different. If you compare, say, for instance, New Jersey, New York to, say, North Carolina or South Carolina, things are completely different. So your location in the United States is very dependent in terms of how they deal with those lockdown restrictions. But overall, I think everybody's in good spirits, and yeah, looking forward to the opening up and the resuming of economic activity.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Werner. And Dirk, yourself, how are things there in London in comparison to here in South Africa?
I think it's very different because we also have a public transport system here, and it's particularly important in London. And a friend of mine yesterday traveled on a train, and she said there were 10 carriages available, and on the whole train there were no more than 30 passengers. So people are very mindful of the social distancing. Shops are mainly shut at the moment. People can go out and exercise, but I think they can not go all the time. They can do it twice or something like that. I've been living in London since 1993, and obviously things have been they've changed enormously now. So I think that's about the most important thing. We can still drink alcohol, which South Africa you can't have. But I don't think that has become a problem in this country.
Okay, absolutely great. So over to our next question, Kalisila, I want to direct this one to you specifically. Apart from working from home, what else have you been doing during lockdown? Maybe you can touch a little bit on some of the mental health work that you've been doing.
All right. So basically, I noticed, I studied psychology when I was at UP, and we have so many groups. So we have WhatsApp groups in like WeChat, and so many people were struggling with, the cabin fever. And, as Dirk said, I am a self-proclaimed hermit. For me, being stuck at home, it does not disturb me at all. And I thought, well, that's bizarre. How is it that other people are really struggling with it, and personally I'm not? And obviously the psychologist in me wanted to look into that, and that's when I started going into it. And the thing is, when you engage with other people and you throw in the word psychologist, you throw in the word mental health, people sort of get very, very defensive. And so I came in from a perspective where we were discussing books. So I basically discussed the EQ book. And in that way, we were going around, but we're still talking about emotional intelligence. And that really was more, I got more engagement with people through that. And it didn't feel like I was attacking, their mental health, or they were seeing a shrink, because, people have their own assumptions about seeing a shrink or being around a shrink. And I think, we've made lots of headways. We've gone through mental diets where we really just engaging with the negative thoughts that we're bringing in, trying to cultivate a switching off of your internet, social media. I love it too, but you have to be very attentive to it. And I think Dirk can speak about, the subconscious mind and how powerful that is. And most of us, we don't actually really understand. And I looked at it, actually just recently wrote about that, being like Siri. Siri doesn't care who you are, what you say. She just records what you say. And then when you're walking past McDonald's, he will suddenly give you prompt. That's literally the subconscious. It doesn't care about if you're saying something that's funny or not, or you're mocking yourself, you're making jokes. It just takes what you say, and then 6 months later you are depressed and you don't understand why, right? All these little things. So we're just trying to catch them, and the ladies have been really responsive. 2 men joined the group. So we're slowly moving, and I think coming from a strategist perspective and putting connections to the world and being very learner mind conscious and putting connections to how you love yourself, how children love themselves, how children learn, and using that to really open your mind up.
True. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Polisile. Kim, I actually have a question that's come through on Slido that I'd like to direct to you, seeing that you're a talent specialist yourself. Would you advise a recent graduate to continue to apply for work and internships throughout this pandemic, or rather insist on self-improvement and patience? That is from Jacobina Lubumba.
Perfect. So I think now is actually the perfect time to kind of adopt both of those strategies. So I definitely think that it's the perfect time to be focusing on who you want to apply to, what kind of companies, grab your interest, and really identifying those kinds of things. So obviously recruiting in the Australian market at the moment, over the last couple of weeks, I've definitely seen a massive increase in the amount of hiring that is taking place. And I think that will slowly progress and increase as we go through time. But within the South African market specifically, you still have talent acquisition managers sitting working at home. A lot of my friends and colleagues, past colleagues, are still sitting here. They are still going through recruitment processes. Now is the time where they actually have the time to process applications. In my previous role, I was actually a grad recruiter, and we would say receive 6,000 applications each year for grad programs, and 100% now would be the time where we would be able to process applications. So I would definitely advise any graduate, anyone sitting at home, take that time, structure time in your diary to look into roles that you could apply to, companies that are of interest to you, graduate programs that you would aspire to join, and begin looking into those sides of things. And then on the side of increasing your skill set, 100% an amazing time to do that. There's a lack of social life, so it's a perfect opportunity to put in half an hour a day, an hour a day on an online course. I've actually signed up to Learning, for example, and then I've kind of put in my diary half an hour a day, no matter what, I sit and do a course, and that's giving me skills that in normal life I would never have time to do because I'm running to a tram or to a train to get to the office on time and getting home from work at 9 p.m. So this is really a brilliant time to kind of build your skill sets as well and add that to your CV.
Yes, absolutely lovely. Thank you so much. Varun, I have a question for you as well. What steps would you need to consider or take to build your career abroad, especially that you've been, in New York for the past 7 years? What advice would you give to someone who has those aspirations as well? That's a question from Tepiso.
Perfect. Tepiso, thank you very much for the good question. Let me perhaps start off with saying, I think with the excellent credentials that the University of Pretoria actually bestow upon their students, and I think the global recognition that the university currently enjoys, my advice would probably be twofold. Is firstly, it's very, very important, especially in the United States, and I would presume everywhere in the world, to build a strong network. Networks are really very valuable for securing new opportunities, and really ultimately for the progression of your career as well. My second piece of advice would be to find a specific area of specialization. Find an area where you really and truly accelerate at, and really leverage that space to secure an opportunity that aligns well to your area of specialization. The reason for this is, as economies and countries and even companies become more and more specialized in what they do, they are looking for very unique skills. And as being part of the Adecco group specifically, we're one of the world's largest, let's call it contingent working and or staffing companies. We can clearly see that at this point in time, even during this pandemic, there's a very specific ask for specific type of skills. So again, to summarize, focus on your network, build your network, invest time with the people in your network, and find that area of specialization that you can truly leverage anywhere in the world.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Verna. Thank you so much. Dirk, I have a question for you. At any point during lockdown, have you ever felt the desire to return back to South Africa? If so, what was the main drawing card?
I love South Africa. My heart is actually buried in Pretoria. That is where my deep love is, and my language is there as well. I love my language deeply. Yes, I would always like to go back to South Africa. It's interesting. I've lived in Germany and in Scotland and in London. I always feel like a foreigner, and my subconscious tells me, "Well, one day you'll go back home," which is South Africa. Having said that, I love London. Doesn't mean that I don't love London. It doesn't mean that I'm not content in London. It doesn't mean that I have not had many wonderful things happening in London. But I'm Aksaboer, so deeply, it's one's mother tongue is not called the mother tongue for nothing. It's that's where one feels at home. Yeah, I can speak for a long time about Pretoria. I'm very fond. It's a warm-hearted place. It's a beautiful place. Shall I speak?
Thank you so much for that. No, it's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your answer, Dirk. Kim, also just touching on the fact that, you are one person who you're supposed to be in Australia right now, but you're actually stuck in South Africa. What would you say have been some of the best and worst changes that you've had to adapt to during this time of lockdown?
Perfect. So I think it's actually been incredible, the amount of gratitude that I have to be in South Africa, even as challenging as it has been, changing my sleeping patterns, being away from my home. I mean, I came over, I packed a small bag filled with summer dresses. I was just coming for a wedding, and now leading into winter, obviously not having my wardrobe and paying rent in Australia and things like that. I'd say that's probably been the biggest challenge. But aside from that, being in South Africa and the positivity in our communities, and the country has this incredible ability to keep our sense of humor during such a challenging time. I think it's such an inspiring part of South Africa. Every time I go to a shop, I think I'm so grateful to be here, because no matter what we go through, it's this feeling of unity. And I felt super inspired throughout the time here. And obviously, probably my favorite part has also been able to spend such quality time with my family. I moved away from home when I moved into Inca on Chengdu campus 8 years ago. So this is the first time being back with my mom and dad and seeing my nephew grow up. So it's the little things like that that I've really appreciated, as much as it brings challenges during such a challenging time, looking at the positive side.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And then Verna, you had touched a bit on, some of the skill sets that one would need if they wanted opportunities abroad. Another question has actually come in, and I think it ties in quite well as well. It says, which skills do you think will be in high demand post-COVID-19?
Very good question, Nthabeleng. I think as the economy is changing, and as what was previously deemed normal starts changing, I think that will also impact the skills requirements.
Sure.
What we definitely see here in the US is ultimately a very significant demand for, let's call it holistically, e-commerce skills. So as the economies are becoming more and more virtual, that becomes the sustainable norm, or the sustainable means for the future. So firstly, from a skill set requirement, I would think, let's call it broad-based IT skills, but specific programming skills will be very, very relevant. And that is across the financial services industry, across, let's call it retail and consumer. So definitely a significant sector to focus on. But equally, as times change and as we become, let's call it, less in contact with people through virtual means, I personally believe there will be a big demand for, let's call it, the finer arts of communication and socializing. So your typical finer arts, your language skills, your communication skills will, in my mind, become a very significant driving force to create the balance between let's call it the virtuality that is consuming the world, and the need to still have that personal interaction with your customers and your clients, because the reality is we all know that people buy from people they like, and you need to choose the channel and the way in which you can best connect with people. So I think the balancing act between technology skills on the one side, but then equally that personable excellence in communication style and engagement will ultimately create the perfect balance for the future.
Okay. Thank you so much for your answer on that. We're going to run a second poll in just a bit, just to update the results that we did from the first poll. The question was, would you like to hear more stories from UP alumni around the world? And the answer was either yes, I'd like to hear more, or no. And we've actually received 91% of you saying yes. So that's absolutely amazing. We're about to move into our second poll right now, which you can also again answer on Slido. The question this time is, do you have any interest in connecting with alumni in a part of the world? Yes, I do, or no? So you can put your answers there again in Slido. Do you have any interest in connecting with alumni in your part of the world? Yes, I do, or no, I'm not interested. Okay, gonna wait for those to come through. Okay, so we've gotten our results. Seems the same as the first time. 91% of you saying yes, and only 9% saying no. So that's really, really good. So let's get into our second round of questions. This one is directed to any one of you. What are some of the key lessons that you have learned during the COVID-19 pandemic? Who would like to take that one?
I'll start, Nthabeleng.
Cool.
I think probably most important lesson through all of this is, let's call it companies and equally individuals' ability to change quickly. So we can probably put it under the banner of agility. I mean, personally, I was absolutely amazed to see how our schooling system literally changed over the course of one weekend, from my kids going to school to all of a sudden on the Monday morning attending school via an online application. So I think agility is probably one of the key skills that we need to all embrace. And I think we can probably put it under a broader context of change management. I think all of us in the future will have to brace ourselves for change to happen at a lot faster pace than what we've been experiencing before. So agility and change management is definitely, in my mind, top of the skills pile at this point in time.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Varna. And then to you, Xolisile, I'd like to know, what are some of the changes that you've made right now during lockdown that you're likely to stick to when things return back to normal?
Definitely going to take myself seriously. I think a lot of times we don't take ourselves seriously, we take our dreams seriously. And so I'm going to take myself more seriously. And then I'm going to surround myself with people that take my dreams, my whatever I would like to, goals, seriously as well, because it's very important to surround yourself with people that can keep you ahead of yourself, that can make you push yourself a little bit more. It's very also important for me to continually be able to see that every coin has two sides. Everything that happens is always another side. And in that instance, to make sure that even in times like the COVID-19, you cannot deny that people are passing away, that the economy is affected. but there's also another side. And at the moment, it's obviously very sensitive to be like, yay, this was really good for us, because there are families that have lost individuals, but you always have to keep your eyes on both sides of everything. And when the COVID goes away, something that's so big, you're going to be in situations where your colleague is saying something that is rude to you. You always have to look at both sides of the story. When you are with your family members, when you're with your friends, there's lots of instances that are virus or are bad for you that will happen, and you need to be able to always have a look at both sides. So definitely going to keep that going, and going to keep practicing, because you have to practice it. It doesn't really come naturally.
True. Very true. Thank you so much for that, Kholisile. Thank you so much. Dirk, you are one who's been like a global trotter. You've gone from Germany to Belgium. You're in London now. How would you best describe your experience abroad thus far? And what advice would you give to people who are actually thinking to move overseas?
I'm very fortunate in that I can speak 5 languages now, and
Wow.
and I've been traveling, and I've been living in many parts, well, in quite a few different parts of the world. What advice can I give? Just cultivate contentment and cultivate alert contentment. And I think what Kholisile said is very relevant. Cultivate an open mind. And yes, be mindful and be aware.
Thank you so much for that.
We have very little time in this world, and we must use it very well.
Very true. Thank you so much. I can definitely agree to that. We've had another question that's come through from Slido. Kim, if you could perhaps answer this one for us. What advice would you give to build networks and professional connections in this time? Not sure if you're well versed in the construction industry. They're asking particularly in construction, and that's a question from Armand.
Perfect. Unfortunately, not too well versed in the construction side. However, I think in general your rules would apply quite similarly. So I think it's always so important to conduct yourself professionally on professional social networks. LinkedIn. I would definitely say your LinkedIn tool is probably your best way to increase those kinds of networks. Your chat maybe in the construction side, you may not find as many professionals in the network as there would be, but that is where you start building relationships with the people that are in the network, and you start asking, do you know anyone else? Because they may have someone's phone number in their phone or know of them, but not necessarily have LinkedIn. So definitely start increasing your networks, connect to people, and don't always just send random connections. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's always an introduction and say, I'm looking to increase my network in this area because this is the reason. I'm looking for a new role in the next month, or I've been made redundant, or kind of give that reason and start the conversation. It always helps to go from that perspective.
True. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And just a reminder to everyone, if there is any question that you want to ask throughout our discussion, you can also post that on Slido. I have been using some of the questions that have come through. Thank you so much for that. Just use the hashtag LeadUP28May, and that's where you can post your questions. So we're going to carry on with a few more questions just to touch base with our alumni. So I want to know, as an alumni of the University of Pretoria, what is your fondest memory of your time at the institution? I think each of you can at least give me one. Let's start with Kholisile. Your fondest memory of UP?
I remember first year. So I'm a Leo by star sign, and I went into Res, and I went to Claridane, whose logo is a lion. And I remember I thought, what are the chances of having that? And so it made, that really small moment really, really special. And RAG was a very, very powerful platform that I was engaged in, and we were able to help a lot of people. and put on some of the greatest parties in our time. So it was awesome. I think I should speak about how much I love studying as well. So that's
thank you so much, Kolisile. I can definitely agree with that. I was also in Asterhof, so I remember the tradition there very well. It was absolutely amazing. In first year, we all had to wear our Statickies uniform. I loved that. I came from a very traditional high school, so I enjoyed that immensely. Kim, what are some of your fondest memories from UP?
Going back to the Statickies uniform, I also had to. And we kept having rules breaking curfew in our first week of first year. So we had to wear tackies with long socks and that long skirt to campus.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I have probably too many memories, and they're all so incredible. I absolutely love my time at University of Pretoria. But one of my highlights was probably the day we wrote our last exam. We made a list of all of our favorite bars across Pretoria. Luckily, at that time, we still had Hatfield Square, and had a drink at each of them and ended off with a swim in the pond outside of. I don't know if I'm going to say that on a podcast, but it was just the highlight, really. Big completion of my 3 years.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Kim. That sounded like a world of adventure. Werner, what are some of your fondest memories from UP?
So firstly, I can definitely relate to some of the other comments, but I think for me personally, I did gymnastics for the University of Pretoria, obviously enjoying the sports facilities. It was, I think it was Alcia de Villiers, the sports complex called, and what really comes to mind was our first inter-university or inter-varsity competition when the UP gymnastics team actually went down to UCT. And I mean, the camaraderie we built there with UCT, with the University of Pretoria fellow gymnasts was something that will stay with me for a long, long time. So truly enjoyed the facilities that the university presented to students to really execute on their sports ambitions. So yeah, that was a very, very fun memory, but obviously every year's RAG presented opportunities in its own right to enjoy. So yeah, very fond memories.
Absolutely amazing. And Dr. Dirk, for you, some of your fondest memories of UP?
I have very many. Now, Pretoria is a very strange place in that when I go there, and it happens every time I go there, there's this sense of expectation, of excitement in the atmosphere. I don't know what it has to do. And you feel that something amazing is going to happen within the next 5 minutes. It never does, but certainly that pregnant expectation hangs in the air for me. And for me, it's very visceral. I'm not making it up. I really feel it every time. For me, coming to Pretoria was for me a bit like coming home for me, where I belong. I discovered my passion for music. So suddenly it was okay to be an intellectual, and I could indulge myself in my intellectual delight in what I was doing. It was also as a young student where I came out as a gay man, which was also for me coming home that's getting where I belong. So so it's been so the whole University of Pretoria for me, the whole experience of being there is just filled with magic and wonder and enjoyment. But, yeah,
lovely.
And I was very
Thank
lucky.
you all so much.
I was very lucky to get my doctorate with Professor Greville, who's recently passed away, and he was such a preeminent composer in South Africa. It's such a privilege.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. Thank you to all of you for sharing those fond memories. I think, Werner, I want to pose another question to you. You know, obviously with the impact of COVID-19, there will obviously be a negative impact in terms of our economy as South Africa or just economies across the world as a whole. How do you see us moving forward, like in terms of the way in which COVID-19 has impacted us economically, in terms of also you being in New York right now? How do you see some of those international relations also playing out?
Admittedly, I could very long time about how that will pan out. So I think the correct answer is time will tell. But what I can tell you is definitely in all the businesses that I work with and within the Adecco group as well, a significant amount of time goes toward planning what normal will look like after COVID. So we don't know that yet. But what we do know is the lessons that we've learned during COVID. So as companies maintain a level of normalcy during these times, obviously some efficiency gains were identified. So the significant use of, say, virtual meetings, the significant collaboration that you see through various amounts of communication channels that were not previously explored, obviously lead to significant increases in efficiency and engagement. So what I see is the new normal, learning from these lessons that we are learning now. Now, what will be interesting to see is how business, especially here in the US, embraces that balance between on-site client engagement on the one side and virtual engagement, because those are two very real scenarios. As I mentioned before, truthful connections or good partnerships are formed through getting to know people well, establishing the trust that is needed between you and your colleagues or you and your clients. Now, that can all be done through virtual means, but we have been doing it previously through personal connections. So once everything returns to almost a little bit of the way that it was before, what's going to be interesting to see is how this balance pans out, because businesses were built with significant, let's call it, budgets for international travel, for local travel, especially in the US, where we get on planes very quickly in order to establish those relationships. Having said that, a lot of my colleagues have found that during COVID, people were more accessible. They were more open for communication and conversation. So the reality is, how this moves forward is probably going to be which of those channels derives the best benefit for the business going forward. I don't have that answer at this point in time, but it's definitely going to be a very, let's call it, intimate balance for the future. And lastly, I think passionate conversations can still happen over virtual means. So personally, I do not believe any of our client relationships suffered as a result of COVID. I think it may perhaps even be the contrary, that insofar as people now knew that people are relatively more available than what they've been before, I think there's a more active attempt to engage. So it's definitely going to play out very interestingly going forward. But I think overall, again, as I said, it's embracing technology to get the best from it, but balancing that with personal engagement once the time allows for that in the future again.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And we've actually received a question which I think ties in very nicely with what you mentioned. If you could perhaps give one specific thing that businesses should be doing to prepare for post-COVID-19. That's a question from Regine Leroux.
Regine, thanks for the question. I think probably top of mind for all businesses is how can they ensure that the employees, which is the heart of the business, feel safe when they return to the office. I think that is what currently occupies the minds of all the leaders across the world, is how can we create that confidence in the office environment? How can we inspire people to feel safe within their working environments? But I think above all, to also advise that people that do not feel safe to return don't have to. So I think the key message here is definitely to have that passionate personal space between a leader and the employees to understand the surroundings on a case-by-case basis and allow for those people to return when they feel safe. Because in the end, that's what employers want to do, is they want to create safe environments where people can be productive as possible. And if the highest level of productivity happens from home for employee A, then allow that employee to basically drive productivity from home, or at least till the environment is 100% safe. but a truthful, honest focus on a safe working environment for everybody is definitely top of mind for business now. And that, Nthabeleng, culminates in everything, allocating office space to different work schedules, to different shifts, to different ratios of people attending office at different times. So I would put that as top of mind at the moment, and definitely so in the US and the organization that I work for.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Xolisile, you're one who, you said you took time to notice that a lot of people were struggling with this cabin fever. And that's when it actually highlighted the importance of perhaps mental health and a survival strategy. Which other areas of research would you recommend during COVID-19?
I am very much a big fan of introspection. I think, Werner has a lot more to share about from a strategy for business perspective. Kim can share about how to get hired and all that kind of stuff. For me, really, it's very important to understand that your biggest issue is yourself, and your biggest ally is also yourself. So really get into researching and getting yourself strengthened. When you're going back to work, understand how are you going to now become the better employee? How are you now going to grow within where you are, be it school, be it your employment? How are you now going to put yourself in a situation that you will thrive? Even if COVID were to hit us 6 months later, it shouldn't be a situation, should it come back, or should something like this happen again, that people are affected. Our jobs are affected, but our mental health really, people were escaping the cabin fever through work. And then when work wasn't satisfying them anymore, they again were faced with themselves. So really put in the research into that, even in cultivating relationships. So if you're now trying to find a job or something like that, be very mindful of relationships and how you can research the people, as Kim said, where do you want to work? Who do you want to work with? Who do you have in your network? So like LinkedIn, who do you have available? What kind of relationship can you cultivate? It's hard to make relationships or make friends with people if you don't know how to make friends with yourself. So for me, also will always come back to just 2 seconds every now and again, just check on yourself, because if you can handle yourself as a human being, I can almost guarantee you can handle the CEO, the bad mouther, the gossiper, the everybody that you have to deal with when you do get your dream job, that you have to deal with when you do have to go back once everything is settled. So back to self.
Thank you so much for that, Xolisile. And, speaking about a person wanting to get their dream job, obviously academics form an integral part of that, in terms of you studying, getting that qualification and then getting your dream job. So in terms of the COVID-19, Kim, would you say there has been enough academic participation across South Africa? And do you think there's also a need for interprofessional collaboration?
Absolutely. I think that it's something that's so important. From what I've seen, I think that there definitely has been some sort of interaction and there's definitely progress being made on that side. But I think that it's a brilliant time to really be building out those kinds of relationships and really getting that market across to young graduates and kind of letting them see what is available out there in the market. I always say, once as a graduate, when you're deciding kind of where you want to go, it can be so overwhelming. And a lot of people sit and say, there's no opportunity in South Africa. I often hear that it's so challenging as a graduate to get a role because you're up against thousands and thousands of others. But that's it's important to kind of pick something that you're passionate about. And as a recruiter, you can see when someone's passionate about something, if they have studied it academically, but they have a true grasp of what they have studied and what they want to do with what they've studied and how to apply that academic knowledge. It has such a massive impact in the application process, so I definitely think that's a really important part and something now during this time when it is slightly slower and there's more time to think about things like this. perfect opportunity.
True. Thank you so much. Verna, we actually have a question that's directed to you. What advice would you give young South Africans who have aspirations of building sustainable businesses? That's a question from Kaya.
That is a very good question. It's probably the $1 million question. So probably my single biggest advice is really to identify a gap in the market. That is really what drives a new business success. So it's always difficult to build a business that competes with existing businesses because you've got brand, reputation, and specifically capitalization challenges or requirements that you may have to overcome. But the novelty of an entirely new concept in its own right is always very, very interesting for outsiders. That means people are keen to invest and understand more, and especially if the idea or the concept is currently unmet in the market. Because I think, Nthabeleng, as we all know, necessity is really the driving force behind all successful businesses. So if you have the ability to identify an unmet need in any sphere of society, be that business, professional, social, in any way or format whatsoever, that by itself, if you can adequately address that need with an easy to use, easy to engage with type of application or business model, I can almost guarantee success. And that to me would probably be the single biggest entry point to starting your own business, is to really excel at something, and then secondly, to spot the opportunity. And once you've got that opportunity, try and keep it to yourself. If I try and keep it to yourself, build your business to address that need as best as you can, allowing your customers not to look outside or look for alternatives. So really provide the best possible service, the best possible experience, and your customers will always be coming back.
Cool. Thank you so much for that one, Verna. Dirk, I have a question for you as well. What is the most positive thing that you think has actually come out of COVID-19?
I think that everybody is aware of the fact that nature is breathing a fresh, is taking a breath and saying, oh, it's so nice that the humans are not being so destructive right now. So I hope that that this new look at the fact that the air is cleaner in China, I believe, is that right? Is that correct, Claudia? Is that the case in China?
I am not available to answer that question. Where I am, Dirk, I am in a very, very good city. As I said, I'm in sort of a Pretoria type of city. So compared to other places, I'm okay.
No, thanks for that, Colleen. I think it is an opportunity to look back and seeing, do we need to fly as much? Because we're flying less now. How much opportunity can we give for the regaining of green, of things that are environmentally good? So I think that is very, very important. Then also people are being less busy. Is all this busyness really necessary? Is it okay? That goes back to what's been said earlier. I think the look back, do some self-reflection. How important is it to keep that very busy all the time? Can we actually manage to have more time to grow inwardly, or does everything need to be done out to the outside? Do we have to engage with the world outside, or can we actually engage with the world inside as well? So those are the main points I'd like to make.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to take about our last 3 questions that have come through on Slido. Kim, I think this one would be great for you to answer. How should professionals brand themselves for an online recruiter as opposed to the face-to-face interview that everybody's quite used to? What is the best way one can actually approach that? Do you have any strong points that one can focus on?
Yeah, perfect. So it's a really interesting space to be working in at the moment, obviously with how rapidly things change. We went from, setting up face-to-face interviews on a daily basis to everything going straight to Zoom, like pretty much overnight. So we really had to adapt new ways. And I think the biggest thing is really to be open-minded to these changes. So we've adopted a technology where you basically interview. So we create the digital CV for a person. And people are so afraid of being on camera. When I say, I need you to answer these 5 questions for a video, it's really overwhelming for a person to see yourself speaking in the screen, to answer questions, to know what to say on the spot. It can be really stressful. So I always say to people, pretend that you're just speaking to an old family friend. You're just updating them on what's been happening in your life, where you're at, what's changed, what you're wanting to go into. Honestly, view it as a situation to speak to another human that you already know. It can be overwhelming when you're picturing, you don't know this person, you've never met them in person, but it's exactly the same kind of communication, So it's all about remaining professional. If you have a Skype interview, dress professionally, do as best as you can from that point of view, pretend you're still meeting them in person. And from a branding perspective, I think LinkedIn profiles, go to media, make sure that you're not coming across as unprofessionally, because people will be looking more into that now, whereas in the past I may not have checked somebody's Facebook if I was recruiting them because I'd get to meet them in person and you can sense someone's kind of personality from meeting them. I now may go to a social media platform and kind of see. So it is definitely changing and bringing around that vast amount of change in that side. So just be aware of your presence, what you're liking on LinkedIn, what you're commenting on LinkedIn, and how you come across from a professional perspective.
True. Thank you so much for that. And then, Kolisile, we have a question directed to you. What advice would you give students to stay motivated during this time of uncertainty, especially dealing with mental illness? That's a question from Senekisile.
One of the things that I discussed with Michael is I heard once that somebody said I was a public protector before I was a public protector. And that's a very powerful statement, because what we do when we're still in university, we are students trying to be marketers, we are students trying to be lawyers, we are students trying to be presenters, and etc., etc. We only wait, or we only become a doctor, a lawyer, only when we get given a piece of paper, or only when we actually get officially hired. So while you are actually in university, I would say pay attention to actually trying to put yourself in a position where you are becoming that which you are studying for. Because if you're studying to be a lawyer and you study as a lawyer, it's different than when you're studying as a student, trying to just pass. That's the first thing. Secondly, try find connections. University is a playground in terms of it's the first round of life. If you make mistakes during university, it's okay, right? Yes, if you fail, for example, it might feel detrimental, but compared to being silly and losing your children through a mistake, it's way different. But here it's an opportunity to learn how to balance your life. Have moments when you're going out. Don't go out too much and don't study too much, because you need to learn that balance early. You will get told about balance when you go to work. I can guarantee you now, being balanced at work is one of the hardest things that adults struggle with. Try it now while you only still have exams. When it comes to mental health, learn how to break down your mental health. So there are situations where the mortals will say, I am depressed. And that is just coming from having a bad day. You really just had a bad day. You maybe just saw a post that was very disturbing, and you didn't actually analyze that post. You didn't actually process that post. And then, like, at the end of the day, you just don't understand, but you feel bad, like something is wrong. And you get that enough times, and then you say you're depressed. And then once you say you're depressed, or you diagnose yourself, and then your body has to be depressed, and so you will become depressed, right? Also, when you're looking at things, if you don't have money, there's a difference between being depressed and not having money. There's a difference between failing, like an actual exam, and being depressed, right? Really try and break down what is actually happening, right? And so even when you go into the UP, I remember when I was still in UP, they had like I don't know what they call it now, but basically you could go and you could talk to the UP psychologist. Find somebody there that will be working with you as a mastermind. Don't go to a psychologist that's going to be telling you your problems. Go there as if it's a strategy. They're trying to help you do something better, like a mentor would help you play football better, or a coach, right? So that you don't feel like a victim in your life. So when you're unable to have people at your disposal, you can look within and you can learn the skills to survive yourself. So sometimes just be very, very cautious with mental health terminology, diagnosis. There is depression, there is mental health issues out there. I will not deny that. But just be very careful that you don't default straight to that, because if you do, you will then get yourself into that circle.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Polisile. I think, you mentioned very, very important points. So it's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for that. We do also have a special guest with us that we mentioned earlier. Our Vice Chancellor, Prof. Tuwana Kupe, is with us. And we also have a question for you, Prof. Thank you so much again for being with us today. Do you have any last words that you would like to give to the alumni of UP, especially those who are perhaps struggling with COVID-19 right now?
Yes, I do. I think there is a time of great anxiety, fears, and uncertainty. This is an unprecedented global solution, but I think global situation. But I think that there's some things that we can draw upon, as Claudia was just saying now. I think trying to mobilize our inner resilience. Sometimes we underestimate how much resilience we have, but also over and above reliance on the self. Reliance on, if you feel anxious, fearful, uncertain, just speaking with other people, you will find they also have the same feelings. And sometimes sharing your feelings with others and finding you are not alone is a liberating effect, if you like. I saw how many people on the questions who agreed, over 90%, who agreed to want to be connected to others. Therein lies a source of strength, a sense of solidarity, a sense of camaraderie even in these hard times. So I think that resilience, peer support, supporting each other, being in solidarity with each other will save all of us and will live to see ourselves thriving.
Prof, thank you so much for those kind words. We truly appreciate it, and we're happy that you were with us today. I have one last question that will be directed to Sam, if she could please join us. Sam, there was a question that came through that asks, just wondering why no one from South Africa is on the panel today. Is there a particular reason for that?
Well, thanks so much, Nthabeleng. Well, first of all, we're all South Africans, so we're all on the panel as South Africans, may I add. The reason for this one was because this very first discussion was focused on who are our alumni across the ocean, internationally, globally. The second global virtual alumni chat will take place on the 8th of July. So please, guys, don't miss that one. And in that particular chat, we'll focus on alumni that's from across the continent. And we will bring those different perspectives into the conversation. And then we have another chat scheduled for the 29th of July. And that one will focus on South Africa, where we will go to the different provinces in South Africa and get the different perspectives. So please don't feel like we have left out South Africa at all. By all means, no, we haven't. We're all South Africans still on this panel, but we are hoping to have in the follow-up chats focus on the rest of the continent as well as locally. So we'll definitely bring you more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that answer, Sam. Thank you. We appreciate it. And then to my panel, Kim, Werner, Dr. Dirk, and Kolisile, thank you so much for joining us today. It's about 5:20 in South Africa. I'm not sure what time it is, Kolisile, there in China.
11:20. It's bedtime.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. But thank you so much for each of you taking time to be with us today, for engaging with us, and also just reminding us that, you know, although we're all graduates of South Africa, we still have friends and colleagues that we can reach out to in different parts of the world. So we really appreciated spending this afternoon with you. Thank you so much for being a part of the panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then most importantly, thank you to you at home for joining us today. Today's episode, of course, was not the last, as Sam had mentioned. There will be a few more that are happening in July. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Also, make sure not to miss the next event that's happening on the 10th of June at 6 o'clock. That's South African time. That one will be focused around a discussion of UP Alumni Thought Leadership Series. Is your business struggling? And that discussion will, of course, be focused on a turnaround strategy for businesses and perhaps business rescue, especially during a time that we're facing right now. That'll be happening on Wednesday, the 10th of June, 2020 at 6 p.m. South African time. So today's event, as well as all future events, are brought to you by the University of Pretoria Alumni Relations team. So we're really grateful to them. The University of Pretoria is one of the largest contact and residential universities in South Africa, with its administrative offices located in Hatfield campus right here in the city of Pretoria. This 112-year-old institution is by far the largest producer of research in our country. So it's definitely one that we can be proud of. Just want to say thank you again for having been a part of this. We love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's event? Did you find it informative? Was it helpful to you? If you can, please do leave some remarks on Slido as well, so we know for future events. But of course, we have to end off with one final poll that we'll have right now quickly on Slido. And the question today is, the last question for today is, how likely are you to recommend this Lead UP event to business colleagues and other alumni, with 1 being very unlikely or 10 being extremely likely? We'd really, really appreciate your feedback on that one. Okay, cool. So while we wait for that, thank you again to everyone for joining us. As mentioned by Sam, make sure not to miss the next 2 events that will be coming up. You can check that, of course, on LinkedIn and all social media platforms. But of course, as mentioned, on the 10th of June, there will be a UP Alumni Thought Leadership Series. Is your business struggling? It will be a discussion on turnaround strategy and business rescue. So you can definitely join us for that one. Right now, just waiting for our results. Okay, so we've gotten our results. 10 out of 10 being most likely was 74%, and 9 out of 10 being also extremely likely was 16%, and the other 0.3% were saying what? Oh, okay. Doesn't even matter. What's important is that 74% of you said 10 out of 10 and 16% of you said 9 out of 10. So that's astounding results. Very, very happy. Great feedback from you. So that means that this was an informative series for you, an informative episode, and we look forward to hosting you for the next one. Thank you so much again for joining us. I'm Nthabeleng Matela signing out. Goodbye.